All right, we are going to bridge again today. There is so much in here. So let me just recap where we came from, right? Last time we talked about Joseph. So at this point in time, Joseph has saved his family, and the Israelites have come to Egypt and they have multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. So it's been about 400 years. And the new Pharaoh and the pharaohs after them became nervous. And so basically said, let's use these Egyptians as manual labor so they don't take over our empire. And so that's what's happening here. Okay. And so we're here and we've got Moses who is in the wilderness. And by the way, Moses is in the wilderness because he fled Egypt. Okay. And let me tell you why he left Egypt. We're skipping a lot. This is a long bridge. What's the longest bridge in the world? Because this is like that long. He left Egypt because he murdered somebody. Moses, it's a beautiful story. I want you to check it out. But Moses had the opportunity to actually be raised as an Egyptian, but he saw all of his people being hurt and being kept in slavery. And he got mad at an Egyptian one day and he murdered them. And then somebody found out about it and he got scared and he ran away. So I want us to sit here and hone in on the fact that Moses, one of the key heroes in the Bible, was first a murderer. Okay. And so God can use anybody. He does not wait for you to be equipped. He equips the called. And so I want us to think about what it might have felt like to be Moses, ran away in the wilderness, living on his own at this point, has found a wife, has a family, and then all of a sudden he sees this burning bush and he goes and he scopes it out. And God basically says, I'm going to use you to save our people, to save my people. And Moses says, no, God, please send somebody else. How many times in your life have you felt that little nudge and you thought, God, please send somebody else. I don't want to do it. God, please send somebody else. Moses said he didn't feel equipped to speak. He said, what if they don't listen to me? It was what if, what if, what if, what if, what if. My daughter says that to me all the time. What if, what if, what if, what if, what if? And I'm always thinking, I'm going to be there. We're going to deal with the problems as they come. And that's what God said. God said, I have a plan. I'm going to be there. I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you help, feet on the ground through your brother Aaron, and I'm going to be there as well within my power. And so I want you to know that and hone in on that and think about the story of Moses. Again, a real person as we think about when we're called to do something and we think, God, I don't want to do it. Please send somebody else. He has a plan. And so this is when Moses comes and to Egypt. And, God sends all the plagues with the locusts and turning the Nile into blood. Again, another big, massive Bible story that we're kind of skipping over. And then he, gets the Israelites out by God parting the Red Sea. And so God says, I know when there doesn't seem like there's a way, there is a way. And he parts the Red Sea and he brings the people out of Egypt. And so as they're out of Egypt, they get into the wilderness, right? They're in the wilderness and it feels difficult. How many times in your life have you thought, I thought this is what I wanted to do. I thought it would be better, but it feels hard. I can think of so many times in my life. I remember when I left corporate America and I started my own business, and so many times it felt like, this is messy. In fact, I think about this office, my background. I just renovated it this past year. And during the process of getting it cleaned out and painted, and that closet back there where you see the door and organizing, there was a messy middle where junk was everywhere. It felt like pure chaos. And there were times during that where I thought, man, is this worth it? And the Israelites felt like that too. There were times where the Israelites were hungry and God was giving them manna every day. And they thought, you know what? Back in Egypt, we had meat. We had pots of meat as much as we wanted. But what they forgot to remember is that they were also slaves. They worked all day. And part of the reason that they had that meat was to fuel them to go do more work. So I think sometimes when we look back, we only remember the good and we don't remember the hard, and we don't remember maybe the slavery or the pain that we're in, and why God called us out. And so I think it's really important that we stop and we think about that anytime we get frustrated and think, oh, I don't know if I can do anymore. That messy middle, God hears our prayers. He does know what he's going through. And we have wise counselors that not only does he send us, but also that we can lean on. And it's biblical, right? Those that have gone before us. And so his father in law meets him in the wilderness and sees everything that Moses is going through. And he says, you're doing too much. You are doing too much. It's not normal. You need to appoint leaders. And so, if you are listening right now and you lead a team or you run a family or you just have too many tasks on your plate, the truth is the tasks are always going to be there. But most of the time, there are different options and different ways we can think through getting through our struggles and getting through our issues. And leveraging wise counselors are a really, really great way to do that. You know, one of the things that I think about in the wilderness, with Moses being there and all the troubles that he had, Moses, when he left Egypt, was in the wilderness also. He was in the wilderness for a long time. And that time that he was there helped prepare him for what he would do next to lead his people when his people needed to be led. And so I just, sometimes we don't understand why we are where we are at. Sometimes it just does not make complete sense. But I can look back in hindsight with a very clear 2020 vision and see that there were seasons in my life that God was preparing me for what was next. He was helping me to get quiet. He was developing the skill sets. He was preparing me for what I was going to need to do and what I was going to need to know as I move forward. And so what we see happening here is we see that the Israelites are getting really frustrated. And there is a comment that Tara Lee Cobble makes on the Bible recap. And many of you might be watching this video because you have read or you're either going to read the Bible with us. But on day 60, when she's talking about what's going on here, she says, the Israelites would try to be good, and then they would see what they wanted, like the land of Canaan, and they would go and they'd try to get it by themselves and it wouldn't work. And so then God would bring his wrath and then they'd get in line again. And what we see is that they didn't trust God to be with them and to fulfill the promises that he would bring them into the land of Canaan, right? The land of Canaan was this land of milk and honey. And so what God is trying to do is he's trying to prepare them for what is next. And as he has them in the wilderness there and giving him those lessons, they're going to go into the land of milk and honey that's going to have everything, right? It's going to have all the things they could want, from sex, drugs, rock and roll, all the things, you name it. And God is saying, I want to prepare you to be set apart. I want to prepare you for what I have ready for you and the life that I have for you. And I want you to live set apart. And so what he does is he says, okay, I'm going to give you the law. There's this law that I want you to follow in preparation. And I'll tell you, I'm not a rule follower. And so I personally really struggle with the law. And if you're even a little bit familiar with, the Bible, Numbers, Leviticus, they're not always the first pages that somebody turns when they're going to read the Bible for the first time. But, the law was really there for a couple of reasons. I'm actually in seminary right now and learning this in my class as we speak. And they talk about in the New Testament how Paul refers back to the law and why it was there, even though it was temporary. And, a transgression is a conscious sin. And by putting the law in place and putting restrictions and making it very clear what was sin and what was not sin, God was bringing sin to the forefront in hopes for number two, that it would deter people, right? The more that we see sin, potentially the more we're able to recognize it, and we're going to ultimately do less of it. We're still probably going to sin, but maybe we'll do a little bit less. And then the last one is to increase moral living, right? So if we do know what's good and we do know what's right and we have a way to repent, maybe we'll do more good than we will do harm, right? That 3 steps forward and 2 steps back kind of mentality. And we learned last week when we talked about the fruits of the spirits in Galatians, we learned what happens when we live by our flesh. Right. So as the Israelites are going to go into the land of milk and honey, and they're going to live potentially with all the sin of flesh around, they're likely to give in. And so God is trying to put some protection and some restrictions in place that says, I want to protect you, right? It's like when somebody quits drinking, they're probably not going to go hang out in a bar. That's probably not the best place for them to be to keep up with their new life. And that's really what God is trying to get them to think about and to get them to do. And, again, I told you we're skipping a lot. And one of the stories that I just love, oh, it speaks to me right to my heart every time, is in Numbers 9. And I just want to remind you that even when you're in the messy middle and even when it feels hard, when we lean into God, He will give us direction. He will send us wise counselors. And so if you go and you look up Numbers 9 and you read through that, you will see that God literally told the Israelites where to go. And I know He doesn't do that always. He's not always that clear. But think about being in the wilderness, how kind God was. He gave them food every day. He told them, gave them the law. He told them exactly how to live and exactly how not to live. And then He gave them a cloud. And when the cloud was over the tabernacle, they knew to stay. And when the cloud left the tabernacle, they knew to depart. And, right now, man, there are some areas in my life that I wish God would give me that much clarity. I wish He would tell me exactly what to do and what not to do. And so as they're in this land of unknown, he's telling them, He's giving them very, very, very clear direction. And so I just want to remind you how much God loves you and how much His plan is better than yours. His plan is better than mine. We are called for this big, massive, amazing purpose that God has ordained for us and God has destined us to. And when we see that bush and we're called and we think, God, I don't want a God. Let's trust Him. Let's trust Him that He'll provide the plagues, He'll provide the manna, He'll provide the wise counselors, and our job is to keep stepping forward and leaning into Him. So I'm so excited about the next day. We've got a long bridge to go through before we get there, but next time we're talking about Ruth, and I love a good lady Bible story. So I will see you on day 5.